something they had never seen before, or maybe they encountered attack and signals and wanted to know where they were originating from. Some of the scientists surmised that happened. That this signal that the TACAN was sending out, they were homing in on. And they wanted to know where this came from. Why they landed when they did, in plain sight of Air Force personnel, we just couldn't figure that out. But it was a strange incident. It happened. Fortunately, nobody was killed. But it's maintained in the annals of UFO history, maintained by the Air Force Office of Special Investigation. On January 22nd, 1985, U.S. intelligence learned of an incident involving the Soviet military and a UFO near an intercontinental ballistic missile site, or abbreviated ICBM site, near the town of Chermenchova in the eastern part of the Soviet Union. U.S. intelligence had a deep cover asset, or agent, working for the Soviet military in the area. Now, an asset is somebody that we send in to do the work for us. Or we call them within the intelligence community the agents. The agent isn't the case officer that sends them in. The agent is somebody, probably normally a citizen of that particular country, who's doing the work undercover. According to this agent, a UFO landed near an ICBM site, number 62, in the early morning hours of January 12, 1985. Now, notice those two dates. January 22nd is when we learned about it. But the incident happened January 12, a 10-day span. Well, it takes some time for agents operating deep inside a country to report back to their case officer. And this is a case of that. This agent reported a confrontation occurring between Soviet military units and the UFO occupants. The Soviet soldiers shot one of the occupants of the UFO after the occupant approached the soldier. After the shooting, several other occupants of the craft retrieved the injured occupant and returned to the craft. A beam of light directed against a Soviet military jeep destroyed the jeep, completely vaporizing the vehicle. The Soviet commander in the area ordered his troops to destroy the UFO. Several rounds from a 12.7 millimeter gun was directed at the craft. Now here we have a war or a battle occurring on Earth, inside a communist country, between a military force, earthbound military force, and an alien force. Now you can just imagine what information was being relayed from the scene through systems, through teletype systems or military communication systems, all the way to the Kremlin in Moscow. You know, fortunately, we were able to tap into some of those communications. We had the National Security Agency with spy satellites flying around the Soviet Union, especially in this area. And those satellites didn't just pick up what was on the ground as a photographic intelligence. They were also picking up signal, or SIGINT as we call it, signal intelligence, or ELINT, electronic intelligence. One of the 12.7 millimeter rounds struck the bottom of the craft. The craft glowed a bluish green color. At the time, 4 occupants of the craft exited and were taken in custody by Soviet military troops. The occupants were described as 1 meter in height, weigh about 25 kilograms, no hair, 4 fingers, no thumbs, narrow feet, wearing heavy boots. The occupants were wearing tight-fitting silvery suits. No weapons were observed on the occupants. which is Soviet military named Shoshashka, or creatures in English. That's the word for creatures in English in Russian. Now, I've done enough of these presentations, and I'm sure my viewers out there have listened to the description of ETs in the past. This particular description of ETs sounds just like the Greys. Exactly like the Greys. With the exception of the boots. But this might be just the interpretation of what these ETs are wearing by the Soviet military. The creatures were transported to Sashalakova, a military barracks near this location, and detained. Once at the barracks, Soviet doctors examined the 4 creatures, including the injured one. The doctors revealed the creature's eyes very oversized compared to the size of their head. The head was pear-shaped, no ears were observed on the creatures. The mouth consisted of just a small slit. 2 small openings were above the mouth and was assumed to be the nostrils. An attempt was made by Soviet intelligence personnel to communicate with the creatures. A number of different languages were used to try to communicate with them. Russian, English, French, German, and even Chinese. However, the creatures could not understand any of these languages. Sign language and other attempts to communicate failed. The occupants sat without making a sound. Now, you can imagine what these creatures were feeling. Maybe we can't because we don't know how they think. But we as humans would be pretty scared. We're in a hostile environment. They're being interrogated by strange-looking creatures themselves. We, humans, who were wearing guns or weapons. The creature's craft was secured by Soviet military personnel. The craft was described as being 15.5 meters in diameter, 5 meters high. The craft was dark gray colored with no noticeable engines. And it did not have any markings at all. No markings whatsoever on the craft. It did have lights that would come on and off at various locations on the craft, but there wasn't any other markings. U.S. intelligence analyzed the report given by this agent. The agent was a reliable source U.S. intelligence had used for 22 years. So this spy, as I can call him, had been working for United States intelligence for 22 years. So he was a reliable asset to us. We knew the agent was there. He was part of the Soviet military team. Although he wasn't actually at the scene, he was in a supervisory position, and he was located some distance away from this. But he was receiving all the communications that was occurring between the ground forces and the command post. The information provided by the agent is somewhat unbelievable based on the subject matter. However, U.S. intelligence feels the information warrants further investigation. Now remember, I talked about collecting ELINT, SIGINT, and voice intercepts before. That information wasn't available to the agents, our assets on the ground at the time, or our team of case officers. That information came later. Ironically, U.S. intelligence did obtain 22 of the 100 photographs taken at the scene. Now, we also were able to direct additional assets into this operation. Not necessarily assets to the scene, but assets within the Soviet Union who could verify some of the information through other sources. In 2006, Mikhail Mumbrovich came forward to relay additional information on the incident. He was a KGB agent that investigated this incident at the scene. Now, years later, we have a KGB agent coming forth and saying, I was there. Oh, let me tell you about what happened. So Mikhail told us what happened. According to Mikhail, he was on duty in the area of this event. And this is his story. On the early morning hours of 11 January 1985, a UFO landed at Zermorov, a small village west of Cherachova. The Soviet police from Kayuta was dispatched to the scene. The UFO was on the ground for 1 hour. The UFO took off after the police arrived. The UFO flew southwest to the missile site where the confrontation occurred. Now we see that a day before the original incident happened at Chermachova, this particular, we think, and they think, the KGB thinks it was the same craft, landed some distance away from Chermachova in a small village, Soviet village. The two creatures, including the injured one, were taken to a military barracks at Kursk, not Sashalakova. So now there's some different information that we're receiving from the former KGB agent, differing of what information was given to our asset, or information that our asset gave to us. That's common. There's so much occurring in a particular area at that time. If you have two assets working independently of each other, they may give you different information. The creatures did communicate with one of the young Soviet soldiers through hand signals. The creatures escaped from the barracks where they were being detained, even though they were being guarded by the elite KGB border troops. Now, within the Soviet Union back in those days, the KGB controlled the border, and they had elite troops. I guess it would be similar to our Rangers or Delta Force Commandos, or even similar to the GSG-9 in West Germany Border Patrol. The creatures escaped. Now remember this. They were guarded, they were in a secure facility, and somehow they disappeared. If you put all this together, you realize that a real incident happened inside the Soviet Union. Maybe this was the Roswell. Actually, this would have been more than just a Roswell incident. This is an actual battle that occurred on the ground inside the Soviet Union between the Soviet military and extraterrestrials. What happened to these extraterrestrials? How did they escape? Or did they just disappear? Did they have the ability to do that? And why hadn't they disappeared prior to this? All these questions we can think about, theorize, but we don't know the answer to. They're gone. But what the Soviets did have, and now the Russians have, is the craft. The craft didn't disappear. The craft is still in hands of the Russian government, probably at Kapustin Yar or some other place, being analyzed, and maybe even reverse engineering. I mean, we did this in the past at Area 51. I'm sure the Russians are doing it today, and they've probably done it in the past. And this is probably not the only craft the Russians obtained. We knew before they had two crafts at Kapustin Yar back in the 80s that they were collected before that. Now, in 1985, they have another craft. It sounds to me like this craft is a lot bigger than the other two crafts they had. So now they have at least three crafts. Anyway, that concludes my presentation regarding the incident at Chermachova. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, I'm Richard Doty. From 1951 to 1978, the United States Air Force operated a series of radar sites throughout the United States, Canada, and Alaska. Benton Air Force Station was one of these defense zone radar sites, located on top of Red Rock Mountain in central Pennsylvania. On March 5th, 1965, 2 Air Force technicians assigned to the 648th Radar Squadron was assigned to repair the radar antenna located near the northeast corner of the radar site. At Red Rock, at the Air Force Station at Benton, there was a height finder radar system, which meant it found high-flying objects. They both drove to the antenna. The day was blustery, with high winds and frequent blowing snow. The technicians arrived at the radar antenna and opened the outer door to access the control system for the radar. Just as both technicians were about to enter the building, they observed an object hovering directly above the antenna. It was a disc-shaped object that was just a few hundred feet above their location. In the front of the site, or east of where they were at, west of where they were at, was a softball field. And just adjacent to the softball field was a helicopter port. The sergeant walked inside the radar building and telephoned radar command post. The sergeant reported the incident, but the command post was unaware of any object on radar. Now remember, this is a radar site, so any objects flying near this site would be detected on the site's radar system. But the operator at the command post told these 2 technicians, "We don't have anything on the radar screen." They became concerned about that. When the sergeant exited the building, he couldn't find the airman. Couldn't find his partner. Looked around, couldn't find him. The sergeant observed a disc-shaped object on the ground, just adjacent to the radar building. As the sergeant looked around for the airman, he noticed that the airman was standing next to the craft that was on the ground. The sergeant yelled for the airman to get away from the craft, and the airman returned to hit the sergeant's location. Both technicians were amazed at what they were seeing. This huge disc-shaped object had landed inside a U.S. Air Force radar site in Pennsylvania. There were lights around the middle portion of this flying saucer, as they later call it. Both technicians walked to their maintenance vehicle so they could drive away. They decided discretion is a better part of valor, so to speak. They didn't want to confront it. They didn't know what it was, and they decided to just get away from it. But as they were approaching the vehicle, they were frozen. Neither man could move. Then the 2 men saw 2 strange creatures exit the craft. The 2 creatures were wearing thick, silvery suits, similar to flight suits. The creatures wore helmets with strange tubes on each side. Both men then felt extremely dizzy. The command post sent an air policeman. Back in those days, military policemen within the Air Force was called air policemen, not military policemen. When the air policeman arrived, he couldn't find either technician. Another air policeman arrived and completed a search of the area. They found the truck, they found their tools, but they couldn't find either the sergeant or the airman. They immediately notified command post. The command post then notified the Pennsylvania State Police of the missing technicians. Then they conducted a search, both inside the radar site by air policemen and by other site personnel, because this site only had 6 military policemen assigned to the site. The search lasted 16 hours. Sometime later, a state trooper patrolling State Route 487 found the 2 technicians walking south along the road, 5 miles from the main gate of the radar site. The 2 radar technicians were taken back to the radar site. The 2 technicians were treated by Air Force medics at the radar station, but then transported to a hospital at the town of Williamsport, Pennsylvania, for advanced treatment. When they got to the hospital in Williamsport, the doctors detected some strange material on their uniforms. They were still wearing their Air Force uniforms for their fatigue jacket, their pants, shirt, and boots. They couldn't detect what that was, but they were afraid that it might be radiation. So they took their outer clothing off, took all their clothing off, placed it in boxes for the Air Force personnel to analyze later. The command post at Benton immediately notified higher authorities. Notified their command post at Stewart Air Force Base, and also notified the Operations Defense Air Sector at Griffith Air Force Base near Rome, New York. Immediately, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations sent a team of agents to the radar site. OSI agents interviewed the two technicians at Williamsport Hospital. The two men told their story to the agents. They did this 2 different times, separated from each other, meaning one technician was in one hospital room and the other was in the other hospital room. They told their stories to 2 different agents. The stories were exactly the same, but they lost time. They were unconscious. They couldn't tell everything that happened. Everything right up to they got close to the craft, the dizziness started, and then they found themselves walking along a highway north of the site. They didn't know what happened. Examination of the 2 Air Force technicians revealed strange marks on their necks, face, legs, and backs. Both men were dehydrated. Both men were eventually airlifted to an Air Force hospital at Stewart Air Force Base in New York for advanced care. Air Force OSI agents went to Benton Air Force Station, went to the site where this allegedly happened, examined the area, and found 4 pod marks, or 4 marks in the ground, indentations. But in the Air Force OSI report, they identified them as pod marks, as if pods or landing pods had been indented into the soil. Now remember, there was snow on the ground during that time period. The OSI agents arrived about 12 hours later, but there were still indentations in the snow. They analyzed those indentations, and there was some small amount, but there was some radiation detected. Nothing else was found at the scene, nothing inside the building. The tools were analyzed, the tools weren't radioactive. And nothing was wrong with the radar. One of the concerns was maybe somebody came in, a foreign power, an enemy, a hostile force, landed and disabled the radars. But the radars were not disabled. They were operating just fine, functioning normally. So that didn't happen. The men were tested for drugs and alcohol, but none were found in their system. A radiation test showed an above normal level in their hair. The uniforms worn by the technicians, which were taken off at the hospital, contained trace amounts of alpha radiation. Now, there's different types of radiation, alpha being particles, beta being particles, gamma being rays, and then there's X-rays. Alpha is the least deadly because the skin can stop the penetration into a human body. The only way to get into to harm a human is through inhalation or ingestion. But they didn't find any alpha radiation in the technicians. Through further questioning, they revealed that once the 2 technicians were frozen, the 2 creatures moved them into a disc-shaped object. Once in the craft, both technicians were placed on examination tables. At this point, the 2 technicians were able to see the creatures without helmets. These creatures were gray in color, large eyes, no ears, only small openings for mouth. Although the creatures did not speak English, it seemed the 2 technicians were able to hear voices in their head. Now, let's talk about that a minute. We've heard this before in past, this is 1965, in past or previous abduction cases, and then abduction cases that happened since then. That although the ETs couldn't speak English, the abductee were able to understand them through some voices in their head. Now later on, years later, I think scientists realized that it wasn't telepathy that it was occurring, it was thought transfer. Whatever the person was thinking was being transmitted through a thought pattern or some wave, some way, into the other mind. So both technicians lost consciousness while on the table. Sometime later, they found themselves walking along a road where they were picked up by a state trooper. Both technicians were transferred to the Air Force Psychiatric Center at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas. The Air Force had a psychiatric center where they analyzed and housed airmen, military personnel, who had gone through some kind of psychological episode or had some kind of psychological problem. During a session with an Air Force psychiatrist, the doctor asked the two technicians if they had been abducted by space creatures. Both technicians answered yes. This was the first time the subject of UFOs or extraterrestrials were mentioned both by any kind of military personnel or by the technicians. Both technicians were eventually released back to duty and was discharged from active duty after their term of enlistment had expired. This is how we learned about it. Chief Master Sergeant Chet Walters related this story to a UFO convention in 1992. Chief Master Sergeant Walters was one of the duty sergeants on duty at Benton Air Force Station on March 5, 1965. Chief Master Sergeant coordinated the on-base search for the two technicians. So now we have somebody who actually was there, although he didn't witness the abduction, he was involved in the search for these two airmen who went missing inside the United States Air Force radar site in Pennsylvania. I had the opportunity to look at the OSI report. I read the entire report. Again, it had some redactions. The redactions, we could piece together what was mentioned in the redactions. Most of the redactions pertain to the mission of the site, some classified information regarding how the radar worked, how the height finder worked, what range the height finder had, what range the long-range radar had. But it didn't have anything to do with ETs, just classified information regarding the site. The Air Force OSI report also contained details, specific details on forensic examination of the soil. Although the initial report that was made in 1965 didn't contain a full examination of the soil and the snow around where this incident happened, or full examination of the pod marks. This subsequent OSI report, which was dated in 1966, June of 1966, some 15 months after the incident, contained a detailed examination and analysis of the soil, the snow, and there was microscopic evidence of some unknown material on the ground and in the snow. When the snow was taken, it was placed by the forensics people from OSI. It was placed in cold containers. They wanted to maintain the snow at its original form. When they melted the snow and filtered it, they found this trace material that they couldn't understand what it was. They had it analyzed by the top metallurgists in the nation. It was sent to Los Alamos National Laboratories, Sandia National Laboratories, and even Lawrence Livermore. They couldn't determine what this material was. As I said, trace amounts of something. Well, even today, they can't determine what.
Don't tell me it's impossible. Restream HCF triple serum, hyaluronic acid, C plus niacinamide, ferulic acid. Together in one carrier triple dose, visibly improves signs of aging, volume loss, wrinkles, dark spots. Restream HCF triple serum.
You want a career in cybersecurity. We can help you get there. Our stackable cybersecurity programs offer the flexibility to earn a higher degree at your own pace. Advance your ambition in cybersecurity at devry.edu.
That material was. It's unknown to this planet. The molecular structures and other analysis couldn't determine whether it was something within our atmosphere or something that we have on our planet Earth. It wasn't. They couldn't identify anything within the periodic chart, which contains all our elements. So they never found out what it was. They've done since some tests, as I was told, and this material might just be something that was a isotope of hydrogen. We know of 3 hydrogen isotopes: hydrogen, deuterium, and tritium. Tritium is radioactive. There's also could be a 5th. The 4th one is short active. They could develop it, but it goes away real quick. Pentagon, as we know now today, they found this isotope within hydrogen. It's probably what was found there at Benton. But they still haven't fully identified it. These 2 technicians are alive today. We eventually, at one UFO convention, invited both of them. One of them came, the other one didn't because of a sickness. But he refused to talk about what he went through. It was traumatic to him. He was afraid to discuss the issue. That particular airman, he was the airman, got out of the Air Force and then went back into the Air Force and made a career out of the Air Force, retiring as a senior sergeant within the Air Force. But he did tell us privately this story, and it was very shocking to him. That concludes my presentation on the incident at Red Rock. In 1959, a UFO landed at a remote, distant early warning radar site in northern Yukon Territory, Canada. The site was manned by U.S. Air Force and Canadian Forces technicians. The site was called Bar 2 and located at Shingle Point on the Arctic Ocean near McKenzie Bay. Now this is way up in Canada. During the early morning hours, a radar technician observed an object flying from the northwest. The technician tracked the object on radar. The object was traveling faster than a normal aircraft. Remember, this is 1959. Thinking the object might be an asteroid, the technician switched on a different radar screen, which confirmed the object was a controlled aircraft changing directions. The technician notified a supervisor, a U.S. Air Force captain. The captain contacted other radar sites along the dew line. Other radar sites confirmed the object was an aircraft. The captain notified the North American Air Defense Command at Ent Air Force Base, which was the newly formed command. NORAD was newly formed back in those days. 2 F-102 fighter planes were dispatched from Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska. You gotta understand that this is a remote location. There wasn't any other Air Force bases around there. So several hundred miles away in Alaska was the closest air defense base available to launch aircrafts. The object being tracked eventually landed just north of the radar site. Although the site was manned by military police, there were no fully armed troops within 500 miles of the radar site. The commander of the site, a U.S. Air Force major, was initially told that the object could be a Soviet transport plane. Now, this is 1959. The Cold War had already started. We knew the Soviet Union was the enemy. Now we see something coming in on a radar screen that was changing directions and landed. And now this commander of the site is told this could be a Soviet transport plane. What would a Soviet transport plane be doing landing in a remote area up near McKinsey Bay in Yukon Territory? An invasion. There's certainly a lot of scenarios that he thought about. The commander of the site sounded an alert and issued weapons to all 49 site personnel. The military police assigned to the site left and drove to investigate the object. The military policemen were armed with M2 carbines and .38 caliber revolvers. Upon arrival at the object's landing location, the MPs observed a saucer-shaped craft on the ground, and two humanoid creatures were outside the craft. They quickly notified through radio the command post, telling them that, hey, we don't have a Soviet transport plane here. That's the good news. The bad news, so to speak, is we got a flying saucer on the ground with two humanoid-looking creatures on the outside of it. Now, I'm joking somewhat, but that's basically what they had. The creatures were described as 4 foot.
So often, baseball beef revolves around the ball itself. The unwritten rules and traditions of the sport leave room for you to express yourself by throwing a baseball at someone. Roger Clemens tested the limits of that construct when facing Mike Piazza. It led to one very, very weird moment and a long-lasting beef. This episode is presented by T-Mobile, America's largest 5G network. Believe it or not, the New York Mets of the National League and the New York Yankees of the American League didn't face each other in actual regular season games that counted until 1997, when interleague play was introduced. From then on, the New Era Subway Series became an annual MLB tradition, and the launchpad for a new beef. In 1998, the Mets upped the competitiveness of that matchup by adding a hard-hitting star catcher, Mike Piazza. The Yankees still ruled New York, though, and went on to win that year's World Series. Then they got even mightier. In '99, the Yankees traded for one of the fiercest pitchers ever, a bit past his prime, but still a force, Roger Clemens, the Rocket. So here was a new superstar showdown. Clemens and Piazza had scarcely faced each other, since Clemens had only played in the AL and Piazza only in the NL, but now they were part of an annual interleague matchup. On June 6, 1999, Piazza and Clemens faced off for the first time as Met and Yankee. Piazza hit a double off Clemens and then a 2-run homer over the Yankee Stadium wall. On July 9th of that season, Clemens started against the Mets on the road at Shea Stadium. Piazza got him with a 3-run tie-breaking homer. The trend intensified the next season. June 9th, 2000 at Yankee Stadium. Sold-out crowd. Clemens on the mound trying to find himself after a rocky start to the year. No such luck. This Piazza grand slam to dead center highlighted another...
Tall, thin built, wearing tight-fitting jumpsuits, silver in color. Both creatures wore dark or gray helmets. The creatures didn't seem interested in the MPs. One of the creatures was carrying a long cylinder device. Fearing the device might be a weapon, the MPs retreated to their vehicle and notified the site by two-way radio. However, the radio didn't work. Shortly afterwards, two F-102 fighter jets arrived in the area. These two jets were launched from Elmendorf Air Force Base to intercept this craft in the air, but of course now it's on the ground. The two creatures got back inside the saucer-shaped craft and it flew away. Since the 102s were launched from Elmendorf Air Force Base, hundreds of miles away, they had limited fuel, limited flight range. And since the 102s couldn't catch up to the UFO, they had to break away and return to base for refueling. Aircraft from Canadian Forces Base Comox on Vancouver Island were launched to intercept the object. The radar site at Punsel, British Columbia, started tracking the UFO, but the object was eventually lost on radar. The newly formed NORAD investigated this incident in June of 1959. Writing a report and submitting it to Headquarters Air Force, the radar tapes and photographic evidence was submitted. Project Blue Book investigators flew to Bar 2 and conducted an investigation. This case was one of the 55 in Project Blue Book files that was classified as top secret. So we had Blue Book back in those days. It originated in 52. Before that was Project Sign and Grudge. So we had UFO investigators, Blue Book investigators, that wanted to investigate the site and this incident to determine what actually happened. And so all the information pertaining to this particular site incident at Bar 2 was classified top secret. The official report released stated the object was a Soviet transport plane that got lost in bad weather. The only problem was that there was only one airport in the area, and that airport, Barter Island Airport, 10 miles away, was closed during this time. The U.S. Air Force had not released a full report, only a heavily redacted document. So, what actually happened at Bar 2? The Air Force gave out a story that, the site was, didn't really identify what had happened. The military policemen misidentified the flying saucer as a Soviet transport plane. Back in those days, the Soviets didn't have many advanced cargo planes that could fly great distances. And some smart people figured out, in order for that Soviet transport plane to fly from the closest base inside the Soviet Union over the Arctic Circle and land at the base or near the site, they would have to have flown 2,700 miles without refueling. There wasn't any aircraft in the Soviet arsenal that could do that. This is a document, the history of the DEW line, or the Distance Early Warning Radar sites, from 1946 until 1964. Lo and behold, in this document contained some information about this incident at Bar 2. But again, as you can see, it's redacted. The classification is redacted. The date is there, June of 1964, but everything else is redacted. I'm not going to show you the other pages because guess what? They're all redacted. Pertaining to Bar 2. Okay, let's talk about what really happened at Bar 2. There was a person assigned to Bar 2, a Canadian Forces sergeant, that is still alive. He's still alive today. He was 18 years old when he was assigned to Bar 2. And he's in his 90s now. But he talks about what happened at Bar 2. And we're going to relate to you what he told us. It was a heavily fogged day when this craft landed. It created a lot of stir among site personnel. And remember, there were 49 personnel, military personnel, Canadian and U.S. Air Force, assigned to the site. He said, we saw what it was. We saw on radar, the radar signature showed that this was not an airplane. This was a round, disc-shaped object that came in to the radar range area. They identified it as something non-identifiable, a bogey, so to speak, and wasn't an Air Force or any kind of conventional aircraft that they could detect on a radar screen. And the radar, even back in those days, knew what a conventional aircraft looked like and knew what the signature or what was appearing on the radar screen was. And this was not a conventional aircraft. It was a flying saucer. It landed. he was in the operations center when the two military policemen returned and spoke with the commander, and were scared to death. They said that these things, these creatures, were not human. They were alien. And they had this cylinder object they thought was a weapon. Now this is where it gets really interesting. Because one of the military policemen fired his weapon. He fired his handgun, not his rifle, but his handgun, which was a .38 caliber revolver. He fired this weapon at the creature, carrying the cylinder. So now we have a discharge of a firearm at this creature. But the creature didn't seem to be harmed in any way. In fact, the senior policeman, the senior military policeman said it seemed to him like the bullet went right through that creature. Now, if we were to read everything in this document, go through this entire document, it's going to explain everything that happened at Bar 2 near McKinsey Bay in 1959. But we're not able to do that. The Air Force is still keeping this from us. Now, we're talking about disclosure. Let's open up files, all the different incidents that have occurred in the past. Historical accounts of UFO landings and contacts, such as this contact. Why not? Let's open this up. Let's have the Department of Defense Inspector General's office given access to this information. Let them go in front of a congressional committee or a Senate committee and report this. Let's talk about these things. They gave gun sight videos of the incidents happened at Nimitz, on the Nimitz, and Roosevelt. That's recent stuff. Let's talk about what happened back in the 1950s and 1960s. Let's talk about incident at Bar 2. Let's talk about a confrontation that occurred between a military policeman and an extraterrestrial, where the military policeman fired his gun at the extraterrestrial, but nothing happened. The bullet went through. Didn't seem to harm the extraterrestrial. But we don't know that. Why? Because the ETs got in their craft and flew away. The F-102s and later on the Canadian Forces F-101s couldn't catch up to this craft. If it was a Soviet transport craft, we could have overtaken it. In fact, it would still be on the ground because it would have ran out of fuel. So we would have had it on the ground. And in captivity, the Soviet crew members. The Air Force report doesn't talk about the Soviet transport plane, or where it went, or how it was refueled, or how it took off. If it was there on the ground, it would have had to refuel, because it would have had to come from a great distance to get there. There wasn't any Soviet transport plane. This incident involved an extraterrestrial craft that landed at this radar site. For some particular reason, we don't know why. Why did it land there? Maybe it was drawn there by the signals being emitted by our radar system. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe they were drawn there by frequencies, radio frequencies. Now, radar operates on frequencies. Maybe that's what drew them in there. Or maybe they were just curious. What was this radar site? What did Earth-based creatures have down there? So they went down there and investigate themselves. And lo and behold, they get confronted by Earthlings, one of them firing some kind of a weapon at them. We don't know anything other than what I just told you. But if we could get this document and get it unredacted through this disclosure that we're supposed to have, we can learn more about what happened there and at other locations around the earth. I hope you enjoyed this presentation on the incident at Bar 2. Until next time, this is Richard Doty. Thank you for watching.
Tone groaned and clutched at the edge of the table with both hands. His knuckle paled, and the tendons stood out on his arms. His whole body was trembling uncontrollably, as if he were freezing, though it was pleasantly warm in the mess room. Breathe deeply.
Okay. Let's see what we got here. Up 332. Up 332. But catch to that. Just because you're up 332, that don't mean you can just, you're not just going to be able to sell off. You got to check it. You got to see where that came from. You got to hunt down the money. You got to find your lottery ticket now. Just because you're up 332, it don't mean shit. And $300 ain't shit anyway, so you got to go through, you got to check. Go through and I'm gonna check and see what's what. Went for bigger gains than that though. Looking for greens with plus signs. That I know that USDP ain't shit. Don't ever buy that. I'm down 389 on that. Silhouette is plus $16. That's not even something you want to invest in. That USDP, you would think it's good, but I got them on an automatic sale waiting to repay me my money. Limit order sale. So if they ever hit that price on accident and have to give me my money back, that's too bad for them. Yep, that's the way I do them. I said I'm on a limit sale. Yep, I buy into them so cheap that there's not a way out of, they can never hit above 50 cents or some crazy shit like that because I'm on their ass. I buy into, if they drop down that cheap, I'll take $20. I'll give it to them, 20 cents a share. You know what I'm saying? 400 shares or some crazy shit like that. Or like 200 shares? Yeah. I'll do that. 200 shares, and then I'm down low with you like 30, 40, 50 cents. But if you ever cross that path again, I get my money about you. You can't help it. Even if you was trying to avoid me, don't even matter because I done already set the limit order sale, and boom, boom, and that's it. But like I say I'm up 332, but like I say, a lot of them I was down on so bad that being up $300-400 that don't even sound like this right here. I'm still down 324 on that. Yeah, and that was new skin. I'm down 324 on that. If I was gonna buy into that right there, I wouldn't pay more than that price right there. Let me see what this notification is. Notification, $1.47. Where's that? Oh, I'm at 202. I'm down 30.38 on that. And notification at 52 cents in 1975. There go the highs and the lows. 21.41, 128. I told them I'm not buying until I see that shit. Let me know when you're down around 52 cents. And I said the high to let me know about 1975, $19.75. They too slow. It is take too long. Way too long. Hold on to your money way too long, and then you just sitting there looking like, what the fuck? That was Qterra, by the way. But it's like, why you gonna let them just hold on your money that long? You gotta buy into them super low so they ain't hold on to no damn money in the first place. Yeah, that's the move. You gotta catch them when it's super low. I'm scrolling down through this. I'm trying to look for something plus. Even this one, even say plus 22, I'm still down 53.97 on that. A lot of trading is money movement, adjustments throughout the day. That's how I can go through all these stocks. I'm still down on all these stocks, but it's the trading throughout the day that has me plus up 4,000, 5,000, and I use this to pay bills because it's the money movement. It's not necessarily one stock or all these stocks. One stock might go up $1,000. You gotta sell that off right there, man. That's how it happens. One stock. This right here. I'm still down 104.48 on Trencio. That one was above my price was above. I'm not buying into it right now. Keep scrolling down. Looking for the big money, looking for the green with the big ass plus money through there. And I see 10s, I see 5s, I see 7s, I see 8s, I see 9s, but I'm scrolling down. Where's the plus 100? Where's the plus 100? Gotta be here somewhere. Just scrolling down, looking through that. Where's the plus 200? Some crazy shit. Plus, that's plus 1880. Nah, that can go higher than that. See, that's supposed to hit at 532. I'll sell off at 399. I would sell off at 399. It's supposed to hit 532, but it's only at $1.05 plus $18 on that. Let that stay right there. Let it build up a little bit. It's like picking money off the tree. And, it's money tree. But I don't see anything plus 50. I don't see anything plus 75. I don't see anything plus 100. It's the cumulative who's got me up right now. But there's nothing in here that is like you can just absolutely sell it off. Just one stock I can just pick off and just say, I just kill it for 200. Now it's a bunch of 2s, a bunch of 5s, a bunch of 20 cents, it's a bunch of little shit, but there's nothing. I don't see anything. Where's the plus 50? Where's the plus 60? Where's the plus 110? Where's the plus 212? Where, some old crazy shit. I don't see anything plus like that. So that's how that'd be like deceiving. But you gotta know how to flip through this shit and read this shit real quick. You're looking for greens with plus on there. Even though this one say up 24 today, I mean it caught up because I was down on some other shit. What's there? There's plus that today. Where's this high at? 21. I'm gonna hold on to them. I'm gonna hold on because it's supposed to go up higher than that. I got a notification for something called SOAR. Look at that. It say it's up 24.06 today, and then it's up 17. It's jumping $17 right there. Where it say total return. So when I go down here and I look at the 52-week low, it says 635 and 21.26 is the high. And the price of it right now is 11.42. They say it's supposed to get high as 21.26, and I'm only at 11.42, and I'm only plus that little money right there. So $10 more a share, 6 shares, 60 more bucks. I should be able to pull out of this one. Maybe 50. 45 somewhere in there, because I would sell it off at around 1975. That's what I got notification for. I would sell it off at 1975 share. What I got a sell on here set up for 18.49. Whatever, 18.49. That's good. I already got an automatic sale set up on that one for 18.49. No reason to test it. Just let it just do it. Because I don't have much money in that one anyway. That was only like 5-6 shares, like $8, $50 in that one. Let it do what it do. It'll automatically sell off so long as you set the limit order. You set them up. It'll automatically do whatever it's gonna do. 374, but like I said, it say I'm up 374 right there. But it's like, even though I'm up 374, it's like real tricky because like it ain't one stock. It's like a bunch of. As many companies I'm investing in, it's a bunch of $2, a bunch of plus 5s, a bunch of plus 7, a bunch of plus $9.41. There's a bunch of that, but ain't none of them really like got that plus 500. That's the one you're looking for. Some crazy shit. The rest of it, you can sit there and just let it just do what it do until it eventually grow, or it grow like crazy and just snap off in one day, go up like $5, $10 in one day. Sit there and just let it, just pick through it. Just pick through it, just look at it. Can't be too greedy on this stuff either. Hertz rental cars. I'm down $4.85 on Hertz rental cars. I got an automatic sale set up. Let them know. Put one up there. I'll tell you what. I'll say I'll put an automatic sale up there. Set up a limit order for $9.99. Yeah, $9.99. Yeah. How many shares I got? 46 of Hertz. I'll take and I'll sell off 16 at $9.99. Yeah, and that'll leave me with 30 and change, 30.96. I'll sell off the 16 at $9.99. That'll be $159.84. So then, yeah, I'll set that up to go for 90 days in the extended hours. Get that right there, swipe up, and it's set. It's not done until it hit $9.99. But the sale is already set up, so I don't have to like even look at it. I'll just let it automatically do it. Automated. AI, use AI to do it. But there's nothing really like, even though say I'm up 370, 376, whatever. It's really like a bunch of $5, a bunch of $9 and stuff like that. I don't see nothing. Even this one, I'm still down 136 on this one, which is interesting. I can show you all these ones. I'm down 29 on this one. But what happens is, now it's at 390 up, it's gonna jump up. Even if it stayed there for today, that would be a good win. Even if it stayed there. Or 350. It just leveled out at 350. That would be a good day. I gotta try to go through the notifications. They coming on screen real fast. Oh snap.
And what if you calling me if it's from the shop? You got somebody waiting on you? Is she trying to get to you?
No, she would have called me. She got my number. Get no call phone. And yeah, it's 9:52. I don't go to the shop. Yeah. Killing it. Killing it. So the money part came up. Damn, I wish I had bought it this one. I seen it low. I'm gonna set a notification for this one. I'm gonna set this notification down. Let me know when it hit $8.99 again. This is bad. That one's that good. That one, be looking at that one too. Yeah, advanced classes, you need to let me know. Cash App. 52-week high, 52-week low. set the notification at $24.99. Change the notification. Stay abreast. You don't need all that algorithm shit, but you gotta be able to swipe through like I do real fast. Buy some of these real quick. Yep, let me do a limit on that. Do 21. Make it even with the change like that. Swipe that up real quick. Gotta move fast with it though. Got 77 quick on them. And I already had a limit order set. See, that's the thing. Got a limit order set. What's this limit order? 200. So if they cross that price, I got them. I got down a little bit lower. If they just dropped down a little bit lower, I got a limit order set already for them. Set at 25 cents, 200 shares, 25 cents. And that one has an uptick of $9 this year. It's buying to them so low. They're not even gonna know what to do. They're not even gonna know what to do. They're not even gonna know. They're gonna be hurt.
She want about nothing. She talking about some conditioner, like she want to know where we're getting it from. Don't even mention this.
All right.
And if she says anything,
All right, and that ain't that.
My thing is, you don't know. You didn't know that.
That's the. Okay. I'm not gonna.
Work at it, Ash advised when no one else offered any suggestions. Kane tried. The deep breath turned into a scream. Oh God. It hurts so bad. It hurts. He stood unsteadily, still shaking, hands digging into the table as if he were afraid to let go. What is it? Brett asked helplessly. What hurts? Something in... The look of agony that took over Kane's face at that moment cut off Brett's questioning more effectively than any shout. The exec tried to rise from the table, failed, and fell back. He could no longer control his body. His eyes bugged out, and he let out a lingering, nerve-chilling shriek. It echoed around the mess, sparing none of the onlookers, refusing to fade. His shirt, Ripley murmured, as thoroughly paralyzed as Kane, though from a different cause. She was pointing at the slumping officer's chest. A red stain had appeared on Kane's tunic. It spread rapidly, became a broad, uneven, bloody smear across his lower chest. There followed the sound of fabric tearing, ugly and intimate, in the cramped room. His shirt split like the skin of a melon, peeled back on both sides, as a small head, the size of a man's fist, punched outward. It writhed and twisted like a snake's. The tiny skull was mostly all teeth, sharp and red-stained. Its skin was a pale, sickly white, darkened now by a crimson slime. It displayed no external organs, not even eyes. A nauseating odor, fetid and rank, reached the nostrils of the crew. There were screams from others besides Kane now, shouts of panic and terror as the crew reflexively stumbled away from the table. They were preceded in instinctive retreat by the cat, tail-bottomed, hair standing on end. It spat ferociously and cleared the table and the room in 2 muscle-straining leaps. Conclusively, the toothed skull lunged outward. All of a sudden, it seemed to fairly spurt from Kane's torso. The head and neck were attached to a thick, compact body covered in the same white flesh. It propelled outward with unexpected speed. It landed messily among the dishes and food on the table, trailing pieces of Kane's insides. Fluid and blood formed an unclean wake behind it. It reminded Dallas of a butchered turkey with teeth protruding from the stump of a neck. Before anyone could regain their senses and act, the alien had wriggled off the table with the speed of a lizard and vanished down the open corridor. Much heavy breathing, but little movement filled the mess. Kane remained slumped in his chair, his head thrown back, mouth agape. Dallas was grateful for that. It meant neither he nor anyone else had to look at Kane's open eyes. There was a huge, ragged hole in the executive officer's exploded chest. Even from a distance, Dallas could see how internal organs had been pushed aside without being damaged to provide a cavity large enough for the creature. Dishes lay scattered on the table and floor. Much of the uneaten food was covered with a slick layer of blood. No, 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 Lambert was repeating over and over, staring blankly at the table. What was that? Brett murmured, gazing fixedly at Kane's corpse. What the Christ was that? Parker felt sick, did not even think of taunting Ripley when she turned away from the Malta wretch. It was growing in him the whole time, and he didn't even know it. It used him for an incubator, Ash theorized softly, like certain wasps do, with spiders on Earth. They paralyze the spider first, then lay their eggs on the body. When the larvae hatch, they begin to feed on... For God's sake, yelled Lambert, snapping out of her trance. Shut up, can't you? Ash looked hurt. I was only... Then he caught a look from Dallas, nodded almost imperceptibly, and changed the subject. It's self-evident what happened. That dark stain on the medical monitors. Dallas didn't feel too good himself. He wondered if he looked as shaky as his companions. It wasn't on the lens after all. It was inside him. Why didn't the scanners tell us that? There was no reason at all to suspect anything like this, Ash was quick to point out. When we were monitoring him internally, the stain was too small to take seriously, and it looked like it was a lens defect. In fact, it could have been a matching blot on the lens. I don't follow you. It's possible this stage of the creature generates a natural field capable of intercepting and blocking the scanning radiation, unlike the first form, the hand shape, which we were easily able to see into. Other creatures have been known to produce similar fields. It suggests biological requirements we can't begin to guess at, or else a deliberately produced defense evolved to meet requirements so advanced I prefer not to guess at it. What it boils down to, observed Ripley, wiping her mouth with...
I'm just sitting here checking notifications on the trading. Checking notifications. This part is very important to know where you find. I do it real fast because nobody in here really. I'll break it down and go through more. But you can see the screen. You see them scrolling through down the notifications down there and changing notifications. Let me stay up on that. Where you buy in, 52-week high, 52-week low. Stay close to the low as possible. That way you can set the AI to do limit orders for you while you can sleep. And that's key. Saw another notification and then you tap. That's for this. CYR. That's supposed to hit 2010. I gotta set another flag 1849. You got 6 shares. No, I think got 23 shares. I'm trying to touch it right now. See anything fall low? I got a couple dollars to buy into some stuff with it. There's something good. Say 90. Let me see. Nah, that ain't no kind of gap. $2 to $4. Yeah. So get this $1.04 on again. I only have, see, I got $1.11 in there. So if this, keep my money out of stuff. If it don't gotta be there. That's no profit. I swear this company reverse split it or something. What got my notification set for? Yeah. 325. Hello? 11:30?
Okay, I see you then.
Cool, cool. All right, man.
All right.
Buy a piece of that. Let's put $1 on that. See what that do. Let me set some notifications up on that. They're too high to buy into right now with this real money. They gotta drop down. I set notifications for $3.75 and $13.75. Yeah, it's at $8.62. So I need to see it like 3 or 4 turn. We got 80,000 employees. So say 100% of people see this buy this. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll put a limit over there real quick on it. I'll say 8.66. Do it like that. That's about 5, 6 shares. 6 shares. Put it like that. Limit that already, yeah. Now do this. Follow back with a limit order behind it. So like $7.99. Get like another. Yeah, I'd have to do that. You want to catch it at if it fall, you catch it at that price. So $7.99. That's good. Less than $50. Still have a little chump change to play with. Yeah. Set that up right behind it. Let's go shoot back up. Yeah, that's constantly moving it right there. That's how you gotta move it.
The non-stained napkin is that we've got another alien, probably equally hostile and twice as dangerous. She glared challengingly at Ash, but this time the science officer couldn't or wouldn't dispute her. Yeah, and it's loose on the ship. Dallas moved unwillingly over to stand by Kane's body. The others slowly joined him. The inspection was necessary, no matter how unpleasant they found it. Eloquent glances passed from Parker to Lambert, Lambert to Ash, and around the little circle. Outside, the universe, vast and threatening, pressed tight around the Nostromo, while the thick, ripe smell of death filled the corridors leading into the crowded mess. Let's get to the real problem, Ripley said impatiently. How do we find it? We can try a dozen ways of killing it, but only after we know where it is. There's no visual scan on B and C decks. All screens are out, remember? So we'll have to flush it out. Dallas was surprised how easy the terrifying but obvious choice was to make. Once stated, he found himself resigned to it. Sounds reasonable, admitted Ash. Easier said than done, however. How do you suggest we proceed? Dallas saw him wishing he wouldn't follow the inevitable to its end, but it was the only way. No easy way is right. There's only one way we can be sure not to miss it and still maximize our airtime. We'll have to hunt for it room by room, corridor by corridor. Maybe we can rig up some kind of portable freezer, Ripley suggested half-heartedly. Freeze each room and each corridor from a... She broke off, seeing Dallas shaking his head sadly. She looked away. Not that I'm all that scared, you understand. Just trying to be practical, like Parker. I think it would be a good idea to try to avoid direct confrontation. Knock it off, Ripley. Dallas touched his chest with a thumb. I'm scared shitless. We all are. We haven't got the time to screw around with making up something so complicated. We fooled around too long by letting a machine try to help Kane. Time we helped ourselves. That's what we're doing on board this bigger machine in the first place, remember? When the machines can't handle a problem, it becomes our job. Besides, I want the pleasure of watching the little monster explode when we blow it out the lock. It was not exactly an inspirational speech, certainly nothing farther from Dallas's mind, but it had a revivifying effect on the crew. They found themselves able to look at each other again instead of at walls or floor, and there were mutters of determination. The next was Brett. He went off to look for Jonesy, who proved to be a hindrance in the search, and found his way into the claw room with the two creatures. As he worked his way nearer to find the cat, he bent to clear a beam and had a glimpse of fur and whiskers. Jones. "Here, kitty. Good to see you, you furry little bastard." He reached for the cat. It hissed threateningly at him and backed farther into its corner. "Come on, Jones. Come to Brett. No time to fool around now." Something not quite as thick as the beam the engineering tech had just passed under reached downward. It descended in utter silence and conveyed a feeling of tremendous power held in check. Fingers spread, clutched, wrapped completely around the engineer's throat, and crossed over themselves. Brett shrieked, both hands going reflexively to his neck. For all the effect his hands had on him, those gripping fingers might as well have been welded together. He went up in that hand, legs dancing in empty air. Jones bolted beneath him. The cat shot past Ripley and Parker, who'd just arrived. They plunged unthinking into the equipment bay. Soon they were standing where they'd seen Brett's legs flailing moments before. Staring up into blackness, they had a last, brief glimpse of dangling feet and twisting torso receding upward. Above the helpless figure of the engineer was a faint outline, something man-shaped, but definitely not a man. Something huge and malevolent. Then both alien and engineer had vanished into the upper reaches of the Nostromo. "Jesus," Parker whispered. It grew. Ripley looked blankly at her shock tube, considered it in relation to the hulking mass far above. It grew fast. All the time they were hunting for something Jones's size. It had turned into that. She suddenly grew aware of their restricted space, of the darkness and massive crates pressing tight around them, of the numerous passages between crates and thick metal supports. "What are we doing standing here? It may come back." She hefted the toy-like tube, aware of how little effect it would be likely to have on a creature that size. They hurried from the bay. Try as they would, the memory of the last fading scream stayed with them, glued to their minds. Parker had known Brett a long time, but that final shriek induced him to run as fast as Ripley. The Nostromo's captain had volunteered to track the alien in the ventilation shafts. There was less room in the shaft than he'd hoped. How something of the size Parker and Ripley had described had squirmed through the tiny crawl space he couldn't imagine. Well, good. Dallas hoped the shaft would continue to narrow. Maybe the creature, in its haste to escape, would get itself wedged good and tight. That would make things simpler. "How is it?" a voice called from behind him. "Not too good," he informed Ash, his voice reverberating around him. Dallas struggled into a crawling posture. "It's just big enough to be uncomfortable." He switched on his light bar, fumbled anxiously for a moment before locating the microphone he'd slipped on. The light showed dark, empty shaft ahead of him, traveling in a straight metallic line with a slight downward curve. The incline would increase, he knew. He had a full deck level to descend before emerging behind the creature outside the starboard lock. "Ripley, Parker, Lambert, are you receiving me? I'm in the shaft now, preparing to descend." Below, Lambert addressed the wall-comm. "We read you. I'll try to pick you up as soon as you come within range of our tracker." "Parker," Dallas instructed the engineer. "If it tries to come out by you two, make sure you drive it back in. I'll keep pushing forward." "Right." "Ready by the lock," Ripley reported. "She's standing open waiting for company." "It's on its way." Dallas started crawling, his eyes on the tunnel ahead, fingers on the controls of the incinerator. The shaft here was less than a meter wide. Metal rubbed insistently at his knees, and he wished he'd donned an extra pair of overalls. Too late for that now, he mused. Everyone was ready and prepared. He wasn't going back. "How you doing?" The voice sounded over his mic speaker. "Okay, Ash," he told the anxious science officer. "Don't worry about me. Keep your eyes on that opening case in case it slipped behind me somehow." He turned his first bend in the shaft, fighting to see in his head the exact layout of the ship's ventilating system. The printed schematic back in the mess was fuzzy and indistinct in his memory. The vents were hardly among the ship's critical systems. It was too late to wish that he'd taken more time to study them. Several more tight turns showed him the shaft ahead of him. He paused, breathing heavily, and raised the tip of the flamethrower. There was nothing to indicate that anything lay hiding behind those bends, but it was better not to take chances. The incinerator's fuel level read almost full. It wouldn't hurt to let the creature know what was following close behind, maybe drive it forward without having to face it. A touch on the red button sent a gout of flame down the tunnel. The roar was loud in the constricted shaft, and heat rushed back across his protesting skin. He started forward again, taking care to keep his ungloved hands off the now hot metal he was crawling over. A little heat even penetrated through the fabric of his pants. He didn't feel it. His senses were all concentrated forward, searching for movement and smell. Sweat was seeping into his eyes, persistent as ants, and Dallas had to stop to wipe it away. Salt burned, impairing his sight. Ahead, the shaft turned steeply downward. He'd been expecting the downturn about now, but the satisfaction of having his memory confirmed gave him little pleasure. Now he'd have to watch his speed and balance in addition to the shaft itself. Crawling to the drop, he pointed the flamethrower downward and let loose another fiery discharge. No screams, no aroma of seared flesh drifted back up to him. The creature was still far ahead. He wondered if it were crawling, perhaps angrily, perhaps fearfully, in search of the exit. Or maybe it was waiting, turned to confront its persistent pursuer with inconceivable methods of alien defense. It was hot in the shaft, and he was growing tired. There was another possibility, he mused. What if the creature had somehow discovered another way to leave the shaft? In that event, he'd made the tense, agonizing crawl for nothing. There was still only one way to resolve all these questions. He started down the steep slide head first, keeping the flamethrower balanced and pointing forward. It was Lambert who first noticed the movement on the tracker. She had a nervous minute until some hasty figuring matched the reading with a known quantity. Beginning to get a reading on you, she informed the distant Dallas. Okay. He felt better, knowing that the others knew exactly where he was. Stay on me. The shaft made another turn. He didn't recall there being quite so many twists and sharp bends, but he was positive he was still in the main shaft. He hadn't passed a single side tunnel wide enough to admit anything larger than Jones, despite the alien's demonstrated aptitude for squeezing into small spaces. Dallas didn't think it could shrink its bulk enough to fit into a secondary vent pipe only a dozen or so centimeters across. The present turn confronting him proved especially difficult to negotiate. The long and flexible barrel of the flamethrower didn't make it any easier. Panting, he lay there and considered how to proceed. Ripley. She jerked at the sharpness in his voice, spoke hurriedly into the comm pickup. I'm here, reading you clearly. Anything wrong? You sound... She caught herself. How else could Dallas sound, except nervous? I'm okay, he told her. Just tired, out of shape. Too many weeks in hypersleep, you lose your muscle tone, no matter what the freezers do for you. He wriggled into a new position, gained a better view ahead. I don't think this shaft goes much farther. It's getting hot in here. That was to be expected, he told himself. An onlooker could easily have read the relief in Dallas's face when he finally emerged from the cramped tunnel. It opened into one of the Nostromo's main air ducts, a two-tiered tunnel split by a catwalk. He crawled out of the shaft and stood on the railless walkway, and stretched gratefully. A careful inspection of the larger passage proved negative. The only sound he heard was the patient throbbing of cooling machinery. There was a repair junction partway down the walk, and he strolled out to it, repeated his inspection there. As far as he could see, the huge chamber was empty. Nothing could sneak up on him here, not while he was standing in the center of the room. It would be a good place to grab a couple of minutes of much-needed rest. He sat down on the catwalk, casually examining the level floor below the junction, and spoke into the mic. Lambert, what kind of reading are you getting? I'm in one of the central mixing chambers, at the repair station in the center. Nothing here but me. The navigator glanced at her tracker, looked suddenly puzzled. She glanced worriedly at Parker, thrust the device under his gaze. Can you make any sense out of this? Parker studied the readout. Not me. That's not my toy, it's Ash's. Confusing. Lambert. Dallas again. Here. I'm not sure. She jiggled the tracker. The reading remained as incomprehensible as before. There seems to be some kind of double signal. That's crazy. Are you getting two separate distinct readings for me? No, just one impossible one. It may be interference, he told her. The way the air is shifting around in here, it could confuse the hell out of a jury-rigged machine designed to read air density. I'll push on ahead. It'll probably clear up as soon as I move. Dallas walked halfway to the end of the chamber. Now he stopped. Is that better, Lambert? I've moved. Am I registering any clearer now? It's clear, all right. Her voice was strained. But I'm still getting a double signal, and I think they're distinct. I'm not sure which one is which. Dallas whirled, his eyes darting around the tunnel, canvassing ceiling, floor, walls, and the large shaft opening he just emerged from. Then he looked back down the catwalk to the repair junction, his gaze setting on the spot where he'd been sitting just seconds ago. He lowered the nose of the flamethrower. If he was now the front signal, having moved down the catwalk, then the cause of the double signal ought to be the alien. The alien was the front signal. The monsters, they're just animals. But this creature... Captain Hankerson tapped the screen displaying the fossilized pilot. This creature represents sentient life, capable of navigation, construction. Those animals put your sentient life out of business, Captain, the same way they destroyed the Nostromo, your Marines, and the colonists of Acheron. I managed to pull a partial translation of that alien signal before everything went to hell. It was no distress signal. It was a warning. We are aware of the interpretation filter which deciphered part of the alien transmission, specifically what may have been the phrase, "do not," twice repeated. No new information had been relayed to Hankerson. We're also aware of the emergency command override. He glanced up at Ripley, used by Warrant Officer E. Ripley to access the details of Special Order 937. A half nod from Ripley. I found your special directive for Ash. It said that he was to procure an alien specimen at any cost. We were expendable. When he recognized I was a threat to the objective, to bring this thing back to Earth, he tried to kill me. It tried to kill me. He's been protecting the alien from the beginning. I tried to tell you. She gestured at the corpse of the recently decapitated and incapacitated android compliments of Parker and Lambert. It was hard to start thinking of fellow crew member Ash as just another piece of equipment. He let it on board, remember? Against regulations. Her expression twisted as she remembered. He was using Kane's life as an excuse, but he was never interested in Kane. He let that thing grow inside him. He knew it was happening all the time. But why? Lambert was struggling, still couldn't put it all together. I'm only guessing, but the only reason I can come up with for putting a robot crew member on board with the rest of us and not letting us know about it at the time is that someone wanted a slave observer to report developments back to them. She glanced up at Lambert. Who assigns personnel to the ships, makes last-minute changes like trading science officers, and would be the only entity capable of secretly slipping a robot on board, for whatever purpose. Lambert no longer looked confused. The company. Sure. Ripley smiled humorlessly. The company's drone probes must have picked up the transmission from the derelict. The Nostromo happened to be the next company vessel scheduled to pass through this spatial quadrant. They put Ash on board to monitor things for them, and to make sure we followed something Mother calls Special Order 937. If the follow-up on the transmission turns out to be worthless, Ash can report back to them without us ever knowing what was going on. If worthwhile, then the company learns what it needs to know before it goes to the trouble of sending out an expensively equipped exploration team. Simple. Matter of maximizing profit, minimizing loss. Their profit, our loss. Great, Parker snorted. You got it all figured out so far. Now tell me why we've got to put this son of a bitch back together. He spat at Ash's body. Ripley already had Ash's head set up on a counter, was running a power line from a wall outlet nearby. We have to find out what else they may be holding back. Agreed? Parker nodded reluctantly. Agreed. He started forward. The engineer fooled with the wires and the connection located in the back of Ash's head beneath the artificial hair. When the science officer's eyelids began to flicker, Parker grunted in satisfaction and stepped clear. Ripley leaned close. Ash, can you hear me? No response. She looked back to Parker. The hookup's clean. Power level is self-adjusting. Unless some critical circuits were interrupted when the head hit the deck, he ought to reply. Memory cells and verbal visual components are back pretty tight in these sophisticated models. I'd expect it to talk. She tried again. Can you hear me, Ash? A familiar voice, not distant at all, sounded in the mess. Yes, I can hear you. It was hard for her to address the disembodied head. For all that she knew, it was only part of a machine, like a shock tube or the tracker. She'd served too many hours with Ash. What was Special Order 937? That's against regulations in my internal programming. You know I can't tell you. She stood back. Then there's no point in talking. Parker, pull the plug. The engineer reached for the wires, and Ash reacted with sufficient speed to show that his cognitive circuits were indeed intact. In essence, my orders were as follows. Parker's hand hovered threateningly over the power line. I was directed to reroute the Nostromo, or make sure that this crew rerouted it from its assigned course so it would pick up the signal, program Mother to bring you out of hypersleep, and program her memory to feed you the story about the emergency call. Company specialists already knew the transmission was a warning and not a distress signal. Parker's hands clenched into fists. At the source of the signal, Ash continued, we were to investigate a life form, almost certainly hostile, according to what the company experts distilled from the transmission, and bring it back for observation and company evaluation for any potential commercial applications. Using discretion, of course. Of course, agreed Ripley, mimicking the machine's indifferent tone. That explains a lot about why we were chosen, beyond the expense of sending a valuable exploration team in first. She looked coldly pleased at having traced the reasoning behind Ash's words. Importation to any inhabited world, let alone Earth, of a dangerous alien life form is strictly prohibited. By making it look like we simple tug jockeys had accidentally stumbled onto it, the company had a way of seeing it arrive on Earth unintentionally. While we may beguile ourselves thrown in jail, something would have to be done with the creature. Naturally, company specialists would magnanimously be standing ready to take this dangerous arrival off the hands of customs officers, with a few judicious bribes prepaid just to smooth the transition. And if we were lucky, the company would bail us out and take proper care of us as soon as the authorities determined we were honestly as stupid as we appeared. Which we've been. Why? Lambert wanted to know. Why didn't you warn us? Why couldn't we have been told what we're getting ourselves into? Because you might not have gone along, Ash explained with cold logic. Company policy required your unknown cooperation. What Ripley said about your honest ignorance fooling customs was quite correct. You and the damn company, Parker growled. What about our lives, man? Not man. Ash made the correction without anger. As to your lives, I'm afraid the company considered them expendable. It was the alien life form they were principally concerned with. It was hoped you could contain it and survive to collect your shares, but that was, I must admit, a secondary consideration. It wasn't personal on the company's part, just the luck of the draw. How comforting, sneered Ripley. She thought for a moment and said, You've already told us that our purpose in being sent to that world was to investigate a life form, almost certainly hostile, and that the company experts knew all along the transmission was a warning, not a distress signal. Yes, Ash replied. It was much too late, according to what the translators determined, for distress signals to do the senders any good. The signal itself was frighteningly specific, very detailed. The derelict spacecraft we found had landed on the planet, apparently in the course of normal exploration. Like Kane, they encountered one or more of the alien spore pods. The transmission did not say whether the explorers had time to determine if the spores originated on that particular world or if they had migrated there from somewhere else. Before they were all overcome, they managed to set up a warning to keep the inhabitants of other ships that might consider setting down on our world from suffering the same fate. Wherever they came from, they were a noble people. Hopefully mankind will encounter them again, under more pleasant circumstances. They were a better people than some I can think of, Ripley said tightly. The alien that's aboard, how do we kill it? The explorers who crewed the derelict ship were larger and possibly more intelligent than humankind. I don't think that you can kill it, but I might be able to. As I'm not organic in composition, the alien does not regard me as a potential danger, nor as a source of food. I am considerably stronger than any of you. I might be able to match the alien. However, I am not exactly at my best at the moment. If you would simply replace... Nice try, Ash, Ripley interrupted him, shaking her head from side to side. But no way. You idiots. You still don't realize what you're dealing with. The alien is a perfectly organized organism, superbly structured, cunning, quintessentially violent. With your limited capabilities, you have no chance against it. My God, Lambert stared dully at the head. You admire the damn thing. How can you not admire the simple symmetry it presents? An interspecies parasite capable of preying on any life form that breathes, regardless of the atmospheric composition involved. One capable of lying dormant for indefinite periods under the most inhospitable conditions. Its sole purpose, to reproduce its own kind. a task it pursues with supreme efficiency. There is nothing in mankind's experience to compare with it. The parasites men are used to combating are mosquitoes and minute arthropods and their ilk. This creature is to them in savagery and efficiency as man is to the worm in intelligence. You cannot even begin to imagine how to deal with it. I've heard enough of this shit. Parker's hand dropped toward the power line. Ripley put up a restraining hand, stared at the head. You're supposed to be part of our complement, Ash. You're our science officer, as well as a company tool. You gave me intelligence. With intellect comes the inevitability of choice. I am loyal only to discovering the truth. A scientific truth demands beauty, harmony, and above all, simplicity. The problem of you versus the alien will produce a simple and elegant solution. Only one of you will survive. I guess that puts us poor humans in our place, doesn't it? Tell me something, Ash. The company expected an astronomer to arrive at Earth Station with only you and the alien alive all along, didn't it? No, it was honestly hoped you would survive and contain the alien. The company officials simply had no idea how dangerous and efficient the alien was. What do you think is going to happen when the ship arrives, assuming we're all dead and the alien, instead of being properly restrained, has the run of the ship? I cannot say. There is a distinct possibility the alien will successfully infect the boarding party, and any others it comes into contact with, before they realize the magnitude of the danger it presents and can take steps to combat. By then it may be too late. Thousands of years of effort have not enabled man to eradicate other parasites. He has never before encountered one this advanced. Try to imagine several billion mosquitoes functioning in an intelligent consort with one another. Would mankind have a chance? Of course, if I am present and functional, when an astronomer arrives, I can inform the boarding party of what they may expect and how to proceed safely against it. By destroying me, you risk loosing a terrible plague on mankind. There was silence in the mess, but not for long. Parker spoke first. Mankind in the person of the company doesn't seem to give a damn about us. We'll take our chances against the alien. At least we know where it stands. He glanced over at Ripley. No plague is going to bother me if I'm not around to worry about it. I say pull the plug. I agree, said Lambert. Ripley moved around the table, started to disconnect the power cord. A last word, Ash said quickly. A legacy, if you will. Ripley hesitated. Well, maybe it is truly intelligent. Maybe you should try to communicate with it. Did you? Please let my grave hold some secrets. Ripley pulled the wire from the socket. Goodbye, Ash. She turned her attention from the silent head to her companions. When it comes to choosing between parasites, I'd rather take my chances with the one that doesn't lie. Besides, if we can't beat that thing, we can die happy knowing that it's likely to get its hooks into a few company experts. She seated herself before the central computer console in the main annex where Parker and Lambert rejoined her. He was right about one thing, Ash was. We haven't got much of a chance, she indicated a flashing readout. We've got less than 12 hours of oxygen left. Then it's all over, Parker looked at the deck. Reconnecting Ash would be a faster form of suicide. Oh, I'm sure he'd try to take care of the alien all right, but he wouldn't leave us alive. That's one company order he couldn't tell us, because having told us everything else, he couldn't leave us around to tell the port authorities what the company's been up to. He grinned. Ash was a loyal company machine. I don't know about the rest of you, said the unsmiling Lambert, but I think I prefer a painless, peaceful death to any of the alternatives on offer. We're not there yet. Lambert held up a small card of capsules. Ripley recognized the suicide pills by their red color and the miniature skull and crossbones imprinted on each. We're not, huh? Ripley swung around in the chair. I'm saying we're not. You let Ash convince you. He said he was the only one with a chance to handle the alien, but he's the one lying in the mess hall disconnected, not us. We've got another choice. I think we should blow up the ship. That's your alternative? Lambert spoke softly. I'll stick with chemicals, if you don't mind. No. Remember what you proposed before, Lambert. We leave in the shuttle and then let the ship blow. Take the remaining air in portable tanks. The shuttle's got its own air supply. With the extra, there's a chance we might make it back to well-traveled space and get ourselves picked up. We may be breathing our own waste by that time, but it's a chance, and it'll take care of the alien. They went quiet, thinking. Parker looked up at Ripley, nodded. I like that better than chemicals. Besides, I'll enjoy watching some company property go up in pieces. He turned to leave. We'll get started bleeding the air into the bottles. The engineer supervised the transfer of compressed air from the Nostromo's main tanks into smaller portable canisters they could lug onto the shuttle. That's everything? Ripley asked when Parker leaned tiredly back against the hatch jam. Everything we can carry. He gestured at the ranked canisters. It may not look like much, but that stuff's really under pressure. Extra air to give us some breathing space. He grinned. Great, let's get some bulk artificial food, set the engines, and get the hell out of here. She stopped at a sudden thought. Jones. Where's Jones? Who knows? Parker clearly wasn't interested in the whereabouts of the ship's cat. Last I saw of him, he was slinking around the mess, sniffing at Ash's body, said Lambert. Go look. We don't want to leave him. We still have enough humanity in us for that. Lambert eyed her companion warily. No deal. I don't want to go anywhere on this ship by myself. Always disliked that damn uppity cat, Parker grumbled. Never mind, Ripley told them. I'll go. You two load up the air and food. Fair enough, Lambert agreed. She and Parker loaded up oxygen canisters, headed for the shuttle. Ripley jogged toward the mess. She didn't have to hunt long for the cat. After searching the mess and making certain he didn't touch Ash's decapitated form, she headed for the bridge. She found Jones immediately. He was lying on Dallas's console, preening himself and looking bored. She smiled at him. Jones, you're in luck. Apparently the cat disagreed. When she reached for him, he jumped lithely off the console and walked away, licking himself. She bent and followed him, coaxing with hands and voice. Come on, Jones, don't play hard to get. Not now. The others won't wait for you. How much do you think we'll need? Lambert stopped stacking boxes, looked over at Parker, and wiped the hair from her face. All we can carry. We don't want to make 2 trips. For sure. She turned to rearrange her assembled stack. A voice sounded over the open communicator. God damn it, Jones. Come here. Here, kitty. Come to mama, kitty. Ripley's tone was gentle and reassuring, but Lambert could detect the exasperation beneath. Parker staggered out of food locker 2, hidden behind a double armload of food. Lambert continued to sort her boxes, occasionally trading one for another. The thought of eating raw and processed artificial food was daunting at best. There was no auto chef on the tiny shuttle. The raw bulk would keep them alive, but that was all. She wanted the tastiest selection possible. She didn't notice the faint red light on the tracker lying nearby. Gotcha! An indignant Jones resisted, but Ripley had him firmly by the nape of the neck. Nor did bracing his feet keep him from being shoved unceremoniously into his pressurized traveling case. Ripley switched it on. There. Breathe your own recycled smell for a while. The 2 flamethrowers were lying outside the food locker. Parker knelt carefully and tried to pick up his. He overbalanced and a fair portion of the neatly lined boxes tumbled in his arms. Goddamn. Lambert stopped her rearranging, tried to see around the locker doors. What's the matter? Nothing. I was trying to carry too much at once, that's all. Just hurry it up. I'm coming, keep your head on. The red light on the tracker suddenly turned bright crimson, the beeper chirping simultaneously. Parker dropped his packages, stared at it, and picked up his flamethrower. He called back in to Lambert. Let's get out of here. She'd heard the noise too. Right now. Something made a different sound behind her. She turned, screamed, as the alien was still unfolding its bulk from the air shaft. Ripley heard the shriek over the open comm speaker on the bridge and froze. Parker looked back into the locker, went a little crazy when he saw what the alien was doing. He couldn't use the flamethrower without hitting Lambert. Swinging the incinerator like a club, he charged into the locker. God damn you. The alien swung at Parker. He tried to duck, failed. The single blow broke his neck, killing him instantly. The alien turned its attention back to Lambert. Ripley still hadn't moved. Faint shrieks reached over the comm. The screams were Lambert's, and they faded with merciful speed. Then it was quiet again. Ripley made her way to the locker. She spoke into the room. Parker. Lambert. She waited for a response, expecting none. Her expectations were fulfilled. With the Nostromo's self-destruct sequence in motion, Ripley and Jones prepared to escape to the Narcissus. Putting down Jones's box, she gripped the flamethrower in both hands and rushed to the shuttle lock. It was empty. She spun and charged back into the corridor and grabbed the catbox. Nothing materialized to challenge her. "Attention. The engines will explode in 60 seconds, said Mother calmly. An unlucky Jones found himself dumped near the main console as Ripley threw herself into the pilot seat. There was no time to plot niceties like trajectory or angle of release. She concentrated on hitting a single button that had one red word engraved beneath it: launch. Retainer bolts blew away with tiny comical explosions. There was a blast of secondary engines as the shuttle fell away from the Nostromo. G-forces tore at Ripley as she fought to strap herself in. The G-force would fade soon, the result of the shuttle leaving the Nostromo's hyperdrive field and slanting off on its own path through space. She finished strapping herself down, then allowed herself to breathe deeply of the shuttle's clean air. Howling sounds penetrated her exhausted brain. From her position, she could just reach the catbox. Her head bent over the container and tears squeezed from her smoke-reddened eyes as she hugged it to her chest. Her gaze rose to the rear-facing screen. A small point of light silently turned into a majestic, expanding fireball, sending out tentacles of torn metal and shredded plastic. It faded, and was followed by a much larger fireball as the refinery went up. 2 billion tons of gas and vaporized machinery filled the cosmos, obscured her vision until it, too, began to fade. The shock struck the shuttlecraft soon after as the expanding superheated gas raced past. When the craft had settled and she unstrapped, walked back to the little cabin and looked out a rear port. Her face was bathed in orange light as the last of the boiling fireglow vanished. She finally turned away. The Nostromo, her shipmates, all had ceased to exist. They were no more. It hit her harder than that quiet, isolated moment than she'd thought it would. It was the utter finality of it that was so difficult to accept. The knowledge that they no longer existed as components, however insignificant, of a greater universe. Not even as corpses. They simply had become not. She did not see the massive hand reaching out for her from the concealment of deep shadow. But Jones did. He yowled. Ripley spun and found herself facing the creature. It had been in the shuttle the whole time. Her first thought was for the flamethrower. It lay on the deck next to the crouching alien. She hunted wildly for a place to retreat to. There was a small locker nearby. Its door had popped open from the shock of the expanded gas. She started to edge toward it. The creature started to rise as soon as she began to move. She leaped for the locker and threw herself inside, one hand diving for the handle. As she fell in, her weight pulled the door shut behind her with a slam. The locker was not airtight. A distinctive moaning reached her from outside. Distracted, the alien left the port to inspect the source of the strange noise. It bent, lifted the sealed catbox, causing Jones to howl more loudly. Ripley began a frantic search of the confined chamber. There was little inside except a single pressure suit. Working rapidly despite her inability to keep her hands from trembling, she slipped into it. Pulling on the helmet, Ripley latched it tight. There was no one around to double-check for her. If the seals were improperly set, she'd find out soon enough. A touch activated the respirator, and the suit filled with bottled life. She struggled to make a last search of the locker. There was nothing like a laser, which she couldn't have used in any case, but a harpoon gun with a long metal rod revealed a sharp tip when its protective rubber end was removed. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it gave her a little confidence, which was more important. Taking a deep breath, she slowly unlatched the door, then kicked it open. Ripley fell back, grabbed the strut support while her other hand flailed at and contacted an emergency release. That blew the rear hatch. Instantly, all the air in the shuttle, anything not secured by bolt or strap or arm, was sucked out into space. The alien shot past her. There was a lever next to the emergency release, and she threw it over. The alien caught the steel shaft of the harpoon through its midsection. The hatch slammed shut, closing her in, leaving the alien outside. Stumbling forward, she scanned the console, found the switches that activated the secondary engines. She pressed several of the buttons. Near the stern of the shuttle, colorless energy belched outward. Incinerated, the alien fell away from the ship. She watched nervously as it continued to bubble, but there had been little bleeding. It finally talked. She punched the small computer keyboard, waited dumbly for the readout. She let out a yell, then moved back to peer out the rear port. A writhing, smoking shape was tumbling away from the ship. Bits and pieces of charred flesh fell from it. Then the incredibly tough organism finally succumbed to the laws of differential pressure, and the alien exploded, swelling up and then bursting, sending particles of itself in all directions. Harmless now, the smoldering fragments dwindled from sight. It couldn't be said she was cheerful. There were lines in her face and a violated place in her brain that mitigated any such possibility, but she was composed enough to relax her body and lean back in the pilot seat. With that wonderful facility common to all cats, the Tom had already forgotten the attack. It curled up in her lap as she sat down again, a tiny curlicue of contentment, and started to purr. She stroked it as she dictated into the ship's recorder. I should reach the frontier in another 4 months or so. With a little luck, the beacon network will pick up my SOS and put out the word. I'll have a statement ready to recite to the media, and will secure a duplicate copy of it in this log, including a few comments of some interest to the authorities concerning certain policies of the company. This is Ripley, warrant officer, last survivor of the commercial starship Nostromo, signing off. She thumbed the stop. It was quiet in the cabin, the first quiet of many days. She thought it barely possible she might rest now. She could only hope not to dream. A hand caressed orange-yellow fur. She smiled. Come on, cat. Let's go to sleep. It ended as it began. The ship and the silence. Ripley accepting that she would not have the luxury of returning to sleep, or to dreaming, or to awakening and seeing Newt's rested face, prepared for Henderson's mission. She and a new team of Marines made way back to where it all started, to LV-426, where once more the silence had ended, extinguished by a new beacon, perhaps the key to humanity's survival. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War, as depicted in the Aliens comic series. The accounts are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. In this specific instance, the heavy metal roots that date back almost as far as Alien itself have been explored. For more on the Earth War, you can check out the Accounts of the Earth War playlists on the end screen, and stay tuned for the latest videos. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. If you'd like, you can also leave a comment. Since this is a longer video, if you made it all the way to the end, again, I thank you for watching, and if you'd like, leave the hashtag Alien40 in your comment. A very, very special thanks goes out to Weyland-Yutani executives Emmerich and Lady Anne, part of our Patreon Hive. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @AlienTheoryYT on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.
Apostle Swaite plays David, an inmate smarter than most, and out of the prisoners enjoys calling error 85. David seems to be the most helpful out of the prisoners, despite being a bit of a nervous wreck, and is quick to help Ripley and her plans to capture the alien. Christopher John Fields plays Rains, and is the second victim of the alien. Christopher seems to be the only actor from the film to work again with David on multiple movies, such as The Game, Fight Club, and Zodiac. Clive Mantle plays William. In the theatrical cut, he gets barely any dialogue, but thankfully more of his scenes were included for the assembly cut, but you still don't see him get killed off. I spoke to Clive years ago and asked him about Alien 3, and he said they never filmed his death scene, and just added a sound clip of him screaming to reference his death. Clive hadn't had much luck during the late 80s and early